I don't accept that it's got lost. If you, I mean, look in the book, you'll see there's a lot of support for it. And it's waiting, as it were, to come back to the center of the discussions. In a sense, of course, it doesn't happen because it's so damn difficult to talk about, but everybody knows this is what actually does need to be talked about. But I'm going to make a point about where I thought this session appeared to be going at the beginning. I got the impression that this global deal was in the minds of some people, forgive me if I'm wrong here, but as if there was a sort of a quid pro quo, that if the North would restrain its pollution, the South would restrain its population. Am I wrong in having detected a notion of that having been in the air? I may have been, I don't know. But it certainly was the case at the time of a Kyoto Protocol in 1997 that the US, India, China, and 16 Anglophone African countries actually, in principle, in the final debate, agreed that contraction and convergence was the deal that we actually needed to be making. I also contend that it was largely because the UK, where I'm embarrassed to say I live, in this last little vestige of the British Empire, sat on its hands doing absolutely nothing to support a lot of positive energy for that in the room at that time. And consequently, the whole thing got kicked into touch and we got bequeathed Kyoto. But to come back to this, I mean, it's almost a sort of hideous global pork barrel politics. And the comparators of this, in the Cold War, we had mutually assured destruction, East and West. Fingers were poised over buttons, and basically they said, if you push, I'll push first, and boom. And it worked as a deterrent argument. It was a sort of a weird, perverse miracle, but we didn't create a nuclear war. In this situation, we've got a development on that, which is called MASS. It's mutually assisted suicide. The feet are flat on the pedals, and basically both sides, it's crudely, but not only north-south, are saying, I'm not going to lift my foot off the pedal unless you lift yours off too. So you've seen that rehearsed principally between the US and China for pretty well the last 20 years. But both sides absolutely know they are vulnerable themselves to the consequences of no deal. They know that both countries now formally do know the consequences of failure are devastatingly serious for not just them but for everybody. So the key thing is how to use this weirdly perverse sort of postmodernist energy to say, well, if it's so, what was your word? Your daughter says, duh. If it's so damn bloody obvious, why don't you actually engage positively with the obvious and state what we all know has to be basically the structure of what has to be achieved, and then only have a discussion about how we achieve it, not whether we're going to. Because if we don't have that discussion, if we don't have a conversation and a dialogue and a policy process fundamentally predicated on prevention, all the rest of it doesn't make sense, because we are accelerating in conditions of mutually assisted suicide to absolutely genocidal outcomes. None of us want to go there for ourselves, let alone, God help us, our children. And so the real point I'm trying to press here is there is a weird, it's not pleasant, but there is a usable energy in this tension where, in effect, the US and China and India and principally as the dominant partners in all of this could actually agree that subject to the limit that stabilizes the atmosphere, a contraction event, a convergence process is inevitably required anyway if you're doing that. It's mathematically impossible to avoid it. You can't expand and you can't, what's the word, divergence, expand. You can't have contraction and divergence. It just didn't work. The numbers simply won't be made to perform that way. That if you're doing that, they could actually structure for everybody's benefit to especially to communicate globally what their real shared sense of purpose and directional behavior actually is. Officially, an entire process that is predicated on accepting this principle that underneath the global commons, that if it belongs to anybody, it belongs to everybody in equal measure, achieved in this manner, and then the finer points of energy policy, wedges, population, and all the other things that come to bear are made possible because they've actually become relevant.
Good.
Thank you.
I mean, and I detect signs of optimism, actually, and hope. I mean, if you have that contraction event, maybe human ingenuity can be brought to bear to do all sorts of... I mean, don't answer that one. Anyway, we're about to close. 2-3 minutes, and I see just... Do you want... I don't want to force you into... Do you want to say a quick word, or... No, you don't. Walter, no? Okay, this gentleman here would like to say something, but before you do, sir, I think we have one hand here, and then 30 seconds each from the panel, and then I'll conclude in 10.
My name is Andrew Bugalinsky. I'm an advisor to the financial services industry, and I wrote for IPCC, their chapter on financial services. I'm just picking up a phrase that Aubrey used, because I think we haven't... My impression is that the negotiations are always looking for the best motives and the highest ideals when they're trying to strike the deal. And if instead we went the other way, which often happens in the USA, of looking for the pork barrel politics, maybe we would get there a lot faster. And I'll just give you 3 very quick examples. You know, CCS, you know, the coal, carbon capture and storage, actually needs something like 20 or 30% more coal because you need a lot of power to bury the bloody carbon dioxide. So coal mines will be very, very happy if CCS is made mandatory because they can sell 20 or 30% more coal. Oil. I had a discussion in 2003 with the chief negotiator from OPEC in an airport lounge, and it turned out that one of their big concerns was a fall in oil prices if limits on carbon came in. Now, why not just set the price of oil at $70 or $80 or $100? Because it's there all the time anyway. It's going to go higher. So why not give them that guarantee they want and get them out of the way? Because these guys are stopping the negotiations. Final example, the financial services industry. UNSCC says that something like about 80 or 90% of the finance required to make things happen will have to come from the private sector. Private sector is very, very nervous about doing business in the developing countries, all sorts of problems, governance, etc., etc. Why not give them, for a period, a tapering tax credit to encourage them to get into that line of business? Gradually you can withdraw it. So why not look for deals, I wouldn't call them quick fixes, but deals which inherently would be sustainable, but get the objectors and the naysayers out of the way?
Okay, that's a very practical suggestion. Final word from you, sir. Front row.